Welcome to Construction Champions Podcast, where we are burning the house down and rebuilding it twice a week. I'm your host, Rod Nussbaum, and I am here to help you become the champion that you're meant to be. Along with our amazing guests along the way, we will provide you with the resources, the latest and greatest. You will sit down with disruptors in the construction industry. And my goal from day one has always been to change the mindset around the construction industry. No more where we let the 3% of bad apes dictate the entire reputation of. And once again, I have another fantastic guest because we've already established you are not here for Ron Nussbaum. You're here for the fantastic guests I bring on, and you know what? I am perfectly fine with that. I would prefer that. So, Jason, it is great to have you here today.
Let's go. I just got amped up with 10 volts of energy at the very least.
Hey, on Construction Champions, we bring the passion, we bring the excitement, because to me, that's what the construction industry deserves, and that is what we should bring. It's what I used to bring to job sites, so now I bring it to the podcast.
It's a good culture. I appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Well, why don't you take some time, tell the construction champions out there a little bit about you and what got you here to today.
Sure. So my name is Jason Paris. Most people know me. I founded a house painting company called Paris Painting. We operate out of the Twin Cities. We're an 8-figure business that mostly paints houses, and we'll walk every now and then into some kind of a commercial project, but that's more like we paint somebody's house and their uncle owns a building more than we are niched into that. So it's a unique business nationally in its scale for residential painting because of the lower average job size, and that we were able to grow relatively fast. So that's kind of what I'm mostly known for. I volunteer a lot through the Painting Contractors Association, which is a 140-year-old organization. I was fortunate enough to serve on the board. I served as chair, and I currently sit as the immediate past chair with them. And then I have a little holdings group called Olive Holdings that I started with 4 of my buddies from college. And we've kind of started by scaling up Paris Painting together, but then also making investments in other, mostly house painting companies across the U.S.
That's awesome, man. And I'm super excited to have this conversation today. And I'm just going to dive right in there and ask you the $1 million question. And that is, what makes a construction champion?
Okay. What makes a construction champion? I think there's going to be character qualities more than like certain tactical things. So one of my favorite sayings is that you never step into the same river twice. And what that means essentially is that our environment is always changing. The industry is always changing. The river you step in today, the world you step in today is going to change tomorrow. And you need to be prepared for that. So I think that the elements that make a construction champion, you have to be good at a term that I like to call wayfinding. And wayfinding is when you don't have an exact map to get where you want to get to, but you know maybe the qualitative element of the destination, and you might know a general direction. So the classic example of this would be Lewis and Clark, Louisiana Purchase. Head west, find the ocean, map your way as you go. Right. So construction champion is someone that doesn't know exactly what needs to happen every single day, every single year. 5 years from now, they don't know exactly what the economy is going to look like, but they're really good at the art of wayfinding. I think that's what makes a champion.
I love that because we hear so much. Like, it's all about understanding where you're going. It's all about having it mapped out. You need the GPS. And what you just said is, you got to be able to get there. You got to.
I think you need a compass more than a GPS, because I think it's a little unrealistic to have a GPS to scale even a construction company. There's just too many variables. The economy is tough to predict. Also, you deal with mostly people, and people are just feral cats, and they're hard to shore up here. But I think you do need a compass, and that is the hard work of casting a vision, setting your values, and knowing what direction you want to head in. But to say that you're going to have a GPS, I don't know if I would buy that. I don't think that's realistic in today's economy.
I would agree with that. And as I think back on my experiences, it is more or less just having that compass. Like, I mean, from being in the Marine Corps and doing land navigation to building a construction company, like, where you're headed. You're just trying to figure out how to get there and get to the waypoints to be able to get to the next waypoint, and you're just moving around. And construction is a very fluent industry, and there's always stuff changing. I mean, it can change weekly to monthly to quarterly and yearly. There's always changes that are happening.
Yeah. It's the art of finding where you're going when you don't actually know where you're going. Right? And yeah, that's an underrated, it's part of being an entrepreneur too. And so, not everybody, it's not a requirement to be an entrepreneur. Very few people are actually entrepreneurs. And this is a challenge that I think we have in the construction industry. My domain expertise comes from house painting, which is a very low barrier to entry. So I don't know general contracting as much, but it's probably not too different, where you have a lot of really skilled technicians that, for one reason or another, end up owning their own business. And oftentimes that's because there's no great options available, right? It's an unprofessionalized industry. It's not very mature. And so they may have a talent as in sales or project management or even VP level operations, or even as a president. But there's really not any great companies for them to fulfill that potential with. So their default is they have to start their own business in order to realize their potential as a technician, which is very different than being a true entrepreneur. Um, but yeah, entrepreneurs are kind of naturally wayfinders. You don't have to be an entrepreneur maybe to be a champion. So maybe I'll couch that. But just realizing that being an entrepreneur is very different than being a technician.
Yeah, no, and I don't think you have to be an entrepreneur to be a champion in the construction industry. I mean, when you look at it, being an entrepreneur it's not, it's for a very small percentage. There's a lot of people that do a lot of great things working for somebody else, but then go out and think they can go do it by themselves. Cause like you said, there's a low barrier to entry. They get in, they want to go out, but they can have a bigger impact doing what they're doing and continuing to learn where they're at. And I think there is a big, more in construction than anywhere, where you have guys that would never be entrepreneurs going to be entrepreneurs because of what you just said. Is like, they don't know what that next step is. How do they go to the next level? It's just naturally, well, I start my own business.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle too, because there's not very robust, mature, or even culturally healthy organizations for them to get plugged into. Right. So now they're not really great entrepreneurs, but they're starting a new company and they're kind of creating the same thing. And they may themselves be amazing. They may hire some amazing people, but they're ultimately building an organization that they're not really meant to be the builders of. And so the people working for them want to realize their potential, and they end up starting their own thing because they feel like that's the only option. That's like a cycle that you get into when it's an immature and highly fragmented industry.
So how do we start unfragmenting it? How do we start bringing this together? Because I think that's where we start talking about what champions are doing and becoming that champion, is we start creating that industry where it's not fragmented. It's not like, I think.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing inherently, but markets tend to stray away from that over time. So if you think about what farming used to be much more of the Wild West. Used to be a lot of family farms. And now farming is large machinery, largely driven by insurance companies. The family farm is, it's dying. And if you have a century farm in Iowa, you're celebrated because there's not many left. Same thing with coffee shops, right? It doesn't mean that there aren't family farms, doesn't mean that there aren't small family coffee shops, but by and large, that industry is mostly unfragmented. The financial services industry would be another one. Dentist offices would be another one. So there's things that over time have become a lot more professionalized, a lot less fragmented. Now, what causes that can be a number of things. Regulation is certainly an option. I have a proclivity against that. I think what ultimately drives change is consumer preference, right? I would say again, ultimately, what's going to drive change is consumer preference. The way you can influence that. So what I mean by that is, if a client has the opportunity to pay for a high priced option, a low priced option, and in their preference perception, they are the same options, they will choose the low price option. Now, if there are two different prices, but there are different value exchanges that they're perceiving, they may choose the high priced option, right? But if you want to be the catalyst for that change, what you need to do is provide real value with a professionalized home service. And when you do that, there is a chance that the consumer base demands it enough that it forces consolidation in the market to those who can actually perform those services in a professionalized way. Now, if the market, like I said, if the market doesn't value it, it will never happen. But my hunch is that there's much more demand for professionalized home services than there is supply. And I think the better we get at producing those services in mass, they'll continue to be a market for it. And that's what will ultimately drive change. There's this other big factor called capital, and capital is always seeking a return. And we all know what's going on with AI, and there is probably a rally too that, that is more of a tide than a wave, that, the trades are going to be kind of the last frontier of where capital can seek a real great return.
But private equity's done a lot to come in and start bringing stuff together. But I think what you're saying about the customer is the key to this. We were the price leader. We understood what our value proposition was.
Yeah.
And that matters. And to stick to that, and I think because you're always going to have the guys that are coming in that they're just going to do it cheaper than everybody else. There's no value, but it's educating.
Or there is. It's up to the client to decide that. Some clients prefer the cheapest price because they don't value what you offer as a professionalized service, and that's okay, right? But by and large, I don't think the market tends to lean that way. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just get excited about these things. So I apologize for that in advance. It's kind of like there's Manny's Steakhouse, and there's a market for Manny's Steakhouse. There's a very large market for the McDonald's, the Arby's, the KFCs, right? All the fast food places. There's also a market for food trucks, and there may even be a market for dumpster diving, right? Dumpster diving would be the lowest cost, right? And probably the lowest quality. Dumpster diving is never going away. It'll always be there. Some people, whether it's by means or preference, that's probably a mean thing to say. It probably is by preference or by means. But there could be unlicensed food distributors on the street. So like whatever a step would be below a food truck, people would still choose to buy that. People still choose to buy Manny's Steakhouse. It's ultimately up to consumer demand. It's going to say, what does this industry tend to lean towards? And we have seen some private equity come more in the licensed trades, especially with like electrical, HVAC, and plumbing. Again, I'm in painting, so I have a different kind of skew on this, which is painting is inherently different than some of those trades. One, there's an emergency factor that's just not present. So there's no paint emergencies. If closest thing to a paint emergency is I have a party this Saturday, but there are real consequences to emergencies with electrical, plumbing, and HVAC. The other is the cost of rework, like the pain of rework from a consumer standpoint, right? So the worst case with rework and painting is you have to do it over again. If you have to do rework in plumbing, electrical, HVAC, that's a big headache from a consumer side. So there's much more. Those two elements tend to push the industry further into professionalization and consolidation in those licensed trades than they would in something like painting. I know a lot of your listeners are more on the construction side, which does have a license to it.
Yeah, and no problem. Like, interrupt me as much as you want, man, because I love guys that are excited and having these and want to have these conversations.
Yeah,
and I think like a big key point to what you said is you have to be okay with it. Like when you decide what your value proposition is, where you're going to be at, you have to be okay with that, because this is where you start to figure out what customer is right for you and what customer is not. I never wanted to deal with the customer that wanted the cheapest possible solution, because it wasn't a good fit.
Mm-hmm. And some people do. I mean, Walmart likes to go the cheapest prices. Mm-hmm. Walmart, it's not a bad thing to be a Walton right now. I'll tell you, if you're one of the major shareholders of Walmart, it's not too bad. But yeah, finding what you're kind of uniquely gifted at and leaning into that, part of that is being, the ethos of the business, and the founder is typically that. maybe senior level management. Even if you're a technician or on the on the employee side, what are you uniquely talented towards or really passionate about? Leaning into that, and that's where you're going to get the best bang for your buck, provide the most value.
Yeah, I would hope the champions that have been listening, if this is your first time listening, think about what he just said. Because if you're out there running a business and you haven't quite figured that part of it out yet, you got to figure it out. You got to pay some attention about who you are and where you operate the best.
It's so easy to complain too, right? So it's easy to say nobody wants to pay my high prices when they can just get someone who's a low ball price. It's like, well, that is pretty telling. Right? I would choose the low price too, quite frankly, if there was no inherent, communicated value difference. And they're like, no one values what I bring to the table. Like, well, that's a market condition. You should probably change your business model if that's true, right? Oftentimes there's other issues of marketing, sales process, just general messaging that come into play. But it is so easy to complain and say, nobody wants what I'm trying to give. Or the other common complaint I've heard is there's nobody that wants to work for less than XY dollars an hour. And the people, I'm not a very kind soul to those people. I say that is literally your job as a business owner, is to find people who want to buy, procure the labor, and put them together. There should be a delta, and that's called your profit. If you can't do those two things well, you should not own a company. You should not be running a business. That is like, at its core, the most simplistic element of running a business is finding people who want to consume, finding people that can produce, connecting them together, have some value add and exchange. And if those two things are really impossible, then do something else. Right? This is not your calling in life. Now that's a harsh thing to say. I believe in coaching. I believe in support groups. I believe in cohorts and peer groups and all those good things. But I'm not a big fan of complaining. And this is a very complaining industry by and large. You don't hear this much complaining in dental offices or accountant offices. But in construction, there's a lot of complainers.
Well, yeah, and I think that's one of the things that holds us back as an industry, because I'm big on we should just look in the mirror and understand that we're the nucleus for whatever's going on around us. And I love that is business in the most simplest sense. And if you can't do those two things, it's not always a bad thing to work for somebody.
Especially if you can leverage their infrastructure, right? That's one of the most beautiful things in life is you plug in with a company and that you don't have to build, but you can magnify your talents through their infrastructure. That's phenomenal. What ends up happening to most entrepreneurs, you would call them, is they get into an organization that they have built that is now a reducer on their unique talents. I was looking for the word there. It's a reducer. So they may be very talented at these couple of things, but they got to run this business to be able to do that. And the business isn't going to scale because it's hard and they're not realizing their potential in this unique gift that they have. Or you can step into another company and that company is now magnifying this ability because everything else is taken care of. You have a unique talent. Again, I love entrepreneurs. I'm an entrepreneur. I love working with entrepreneurs. I'm not trying to tell someone they're not an entrepreneur, but it is many, many, many more few people than think that they are right now. I think it's been glamorized a little bit. It's a hustle economy. It's a tough economy. It's a boom economy. Nobody knows, but it's a unique thing that you should really have some introspection around of, am I called to be an entrepreneur? Because it really is a sickness. And if you're not, it's going to be pretty traumatizing and pretty, you ultimately, most of the time people end up becoming martyrs when they put themselves in that situation, if it's not their true calling.
I love it. You use very, very just some of the best terminologies that I have heard. We're 130 episodes into this, but just plain, concise, and you can tell your stuff. You can definitely tell that.
Yeah, I know my beliefs, and it's hard for me to say I know things. Right, I try and think about things a little bit and be clear in what you believe. But I'm open. I'm wrong more oftentimes than not. I'm open to be proven wrong. As I said when we started this thing, you never step into the same river twice. So maybe I'll sing a different tune a few years from now. But hopefully this strikes a tune with a couple people, and if it's said in a succinct way or a way that's easy and consumed, or it's not just surface level talk where people are saying platitudes like you gotta plan your work and work your plan. People are like, what is he even saying? Hopefully I'm providing some sustenance that people are actually thinking through some of these concepts and doing some self-reflection.
I 100%. I mean, I think you're definitely hitting the nail on the head. And I guess one question I have, so it's like you're in a big market. You're in other markets, I would assume with your
Yeah.
venture stuff that you're doing is what are you seeing in the market right now throughout the United States? What's your feel? What's your thumb on that with what you think is going to be happening here 2024 into 2025?
So I'll say, broad scale, it's good indicators, Q1 2024. Everyone had some hesitation, Q4 of last year. And I think we've all been pleasantly surprised at how resilient this market has been. The Fed just announced, I think this week, if not yesterday, that they are kind of slow stepping a drop in interest rates, which hasn't blown things up. And it's actually pretty encouraging for someone like me to step back and say, wow, this is great. The Fed has a lot of tools still. If things start to slow down, that's a little bit of gas they can pour on the fire. But all that to be said, I stand by what I said. Started hammering on in about probably 2017, which is your only competition is your ability to execute your business model. And that is as true today as it was and when I said it back then, and especially if you're in the trades. This is not a very saturated industry of high professional business talent. This is very fragmented. The bar is very low. You are only limited by your ability to execute your business model. That will determine your level of success. That will determine your level of scale. The economy could cut in half and you still would not be limited by a market cap. Because the amount of performance that's out, just the level of performance that's out there by and large, is just, you should be outperforming that. It's a pretty sad state. And I just call a spade there. So that's my, my general tone. We're off to a strong Q1. We have a lot of tools in the toolkit to stay resilient. It looks like this year, macro scale, you've got the boomers retiring, millennials haven't gotten in, simple supply and demand. Millennials that are buying houses are not do-it-yourselfers, right? So simple supply and demand. You've got a great access point there. Then you've got the macro scale, the macro items of what's happening with AI. Is there a 5 to 10 year outlook on the white collar jobs? What does that flux into the blue collar jobs look like? If you can get well positioned now, it's a great place to be. For the short term, it looks great. For the medium term, it looks great. Long term, you got to be competitive. And if you're not getting sharp, if you're not skilling up, if you're not getting professional, you will get destroyed. You'll just get wiped out. And rightfully so, because we want this industry professionalized. Consumers demand better. We have stereotypes that are pretty bad, and stereotypes are there for a reason, and that doesn't last forever.
Mic drop, man. I mean, this is why we do Construction Champions podcast, is because what you're talking about happening to be successful in the long term is what everybody needs to do. Like, that is where we need to take the industry.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's a lot of profit. You call it like there's a surplus of profit for the level of business professionalism that's in this industry. And with that, as AI starts to, leverage out white collar jobs, these profits should be competed away or competed more competitively. And I think we've all met the guy that we lost the bid to, or maybe you were that person 10 years ago and you're like, shoot, that was not like an A+ experience for that client. And that is the stereotype of our industry. Yet it can be very, very profitable. And you would say it's only a matter of time until top business talent and capital looks to exploit that, right, and compete those profits away. And that is, again, it's the right thing for the industry. It's what ultimately drives demand or drives professionalism. It's not, in my opinion, regulation that drives that. It's consumer preference. Once they get a taste of what professionalized services look like, that's something we try to do at Paris Painting, is set an unrealistic expectation standard that anybody else is going to have a hard time meeting. So now you've got a problem client because they expect what Paris Painting delivers. It's very hard to replicate unless you have a professionalized company at scale. Right, so now the consumers start to demand that. Then you have more of the tide, less than a wave of just business talent and capital looking to seek returns.
Awesome, man. I love it. I love what you're talking about. And thank you for taking the time to be on the show today.
Absolutely, man. This was fun. Appreciate you reaching out. Yeah.
So for all the construction champions out there, if they wanted to connect with you, learn more about what you do, follow you, where's the best places for them to do that?
Yeah. I'm a millennial, so I'm pretty active on social media. So if you go to Facebook or Instagram, I'm Jason Paris. I live in Minnesota. You can probably find me there. If you email me, you can do Jason at aleph-management.com. And that's going to be spelled out ALEPH-MGMT.com. So if you figure out how to spell that and write it, it's a good hurdle for people. And if you want to call me, I'll never answer your call because I'm a millennial. You can only text me, but I'm not going to give you my number. You have to earn it. So good luck there.
I will put that in the show notes to help people out there. But yeah, once again, thank you for taking the time to be in on the show today. It's been fantastic. And I love your knowledge. I love what you spit, man.
Good job, man. It was good energy. I appreciate it. This was an enjoyable one.
Awesome. All right, construction champions, another episode in the bag. And you know what? Jason, he just talks about what being a construction champion is in every essence. When he talks about the future of the industry, where we're headed, what it should look like. It's why I made the show. It's to go. So guys had access to that. So they start to understand is that as an industry, we have to just rise. We have to do better for our customers to change the mindset. Because if we don't do that, the mindset of the customers never changes. And then the mindset and how the construction industry is looked upon never changes. And we just stay in this state where we let the bad eggs dictate our entire reputation in everything that we do. And I don't believe that's how it should be. I've shared that on here multiple times. We need to start to just come together and raise the bar. I think a good look in the mirror moment is, hey, we're all about entrepreneurship here, but it's not necessarily for everybody. And in the construction industry, I think we feel that harder than any other realm because you can go out and get a construction business, be up and going if you're good at what you're doing. But a lot of times we just buy ourselves a job when you could be a really good resource to somebody. And you could probably make more money going and working for somebody else and deliver a better customer experience because you're happier and you're doing what you love to do. So I think that's a good thing to look at for everybody out there listening today is maybe just take a moment and be like, am I cut out to do this? Am I delivering an experience to my customers that moves the industry forward because I'm meant to be an entrepreneur, because I'm meant to be a construction business owner? Or am I failing that and actually doing more harm to myself and the industry as a whole? So construction champions, ask yourself that question.